Hello everyone and welcome to our circle Anne Salve Women. For today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my article, Finding Reasons to Recite a Promise Through a Pledge. And you know, when I look at the meaning of pledge, it truly is a promise. And I really want to be able to say first and foremost that I get it. Just like I wrote in my article, everyone has reasons for why they do what they do and why they don't do what they feel like they shouldn't be doing. And you know, we're all trying to make a stand, and that's the beauty about having that liberty, that freedom to do so. And so it just was something that I felt like I had to write about, given my observation in the classroom that in the past, it was no question, no doubt, we all stood up and did the Pledge of Allegiance. And for, you know, whoever started it, there's no to blame for that. It was, or all of a sudden people are empowered, really, if you think about it, to not have to stand up and recite a pledge that they don't feel comfortable doing. That's completely to be respected and understood in my heart. That's my healing. That's my way of saying, you know what, there's no fight in that. If people are compelled to not to have to stand up, then that's their prerogative, right? But what tends to dawn to me in question in my mind as I'm reciting, I'm just quietly doing my part, is that I had to ask myself, when I see that it's not the same students getting up all the time, or it's not the same ones taking a seat every time, I have to wonder, is this something that they know true in their heart and their mind, their body and their spirit, as to why they don't stand up, or why they do stand up? Is it something that they only do because they see that someone else is doing it? And whether someone else next to them decide to sit down or stand up, that is what I question. And that is what concerns me, because then as a teacher, as a parent, as just a true individual, I have to wonder, have we arrived to that type of social influence where I'm starting to see that perhaps it could be a trend, that today I'm going to stand up, tomorrow I'll stand up, or maybe I won't. Oh, wait a minute, I plan to stand up, but then no one else seems to be standing up, so I won't. That to me is that fickleness. You know, I always think to myself, like when I read and people are pushing for others to, you know, be crucified, or to be just put to death, or to be punished, at what time did you make that ultimate decision to jump in and then chant with everyone else? Were you the first? Were you even the second? Or you were like the 101st or the 1000th behind? I have to ask then, at what point did you make that decision, and was it solely your own? And so I share with you two somewhat comical stories, but when you, some of you may be listening and on it may think that's not very funny, and I am so thankful for the grace I've been given with many kind people around, because I look back and I was thinking, oh my goodness, sometimes I put myself at maybe a confidence level. Some can argue and say that's a little bit of an arrogant, narcissistic level, because for me, when I am headstrong about something, it's just one way. I already in my mind think, I'm already going to get this. And so sometimes it may take a little bit of a time for me to look back and go, I may have offended some people along the way. And so the story that I want to share with you regarding this, what relates to this, is the time when I actually was going in for my own citizenship. I hadn't found out until much later. Actually, I was married, I was a parent, and I realized that my votes didn't count because I was not actually a naturalized citizen to my discovery. And of course, right away, I wanted to address it, and I wanted to handle it. And so I went through the naturalization process, and thankfully I was already here many years. I mean, I arrived here when I was 7 years old, and it was only because one of my parents at the time that they had become naturalized, I had been already I had just turned 18. And so there was that clause right there that that really prevented me from becoming a naturalized citizen since I was not under the age of 18. And I believe at that time, or even probably still now, that is the rule, is that your children have to be under the age of 18 to become naturalized, which makes, fair sense. And so here I am applying, and in my thoughts, I was like, lived there practically all my life. And so when I'm taking this, I've applied and so forth, and I go into my interview, they had sent me like the U.S. Constitution things to read and so forth. And I was like, if I hadn't learned all this, here all my life, then what am I really as a citizen? And so that was my thoughts. I'm going in. And I shared with you very much that my arrogance is that way when it came to like me getting my driver's license. I think I was 23 the time I got my driver's license. And because, being a lady, I never felt like I needed to have my driver's license until then. And plus, everything was walking distance from me, and just didn't think I had to have one until then. And so I remember going in, taking my written test, missed it by 1 point. It was amber lights. I question everything. So I was like, that word amber doesn't make sense to me. And, it was like red, but then I was like, that could be red, orange in my mind. And so when I missed that question, I still remember, came back, took the test again, and the soonest I could, and didn't study again because I was like, I got this. And I did the same thing with my driver's test. Failed it because a person around the corner, sounded like a person who blames everybody else, just as I was re-entering, did a perfect parallel parking. Perfect. Honestly, I was like, sweet. And then all of a sudden, person around the corner just honked at me because I was trying to re-enter traffic in the residential community. And because of that, I failed. And, of course, I look back and I go, of course, that's understandable why I failed that, because I should have really paused. And, as you get older, there are people who honk back. I wasn't that person. I still am not. So in that case, I told my papa who could come with me, we're going to go to another one and another, driver's licensing place, and I'm going to go ahead and get my driver's license today, which I did. And they found out that I had just taken a test somewhere else, and it was after I'd already passed the test, so how could you deny it? And so, the person who gave it to me was a little bit, just gave me their words of speech, of a very brief one, as to why I shouldn't have gotten it, but fortunately still was because their supervisor was there. I was granted, and I was very thankful. That's just the mentality sometimes you have to have. It's like, there's no denying what you want. And so when I went in for my naturalization, it was this sense of confidence, like, I got this already. This is what I asked for. I wrote like this long paper explaining my situation. Probably didn't even have to write that long. And when I came in for my test, oh my goodness, lo and behold, the person who was interviewing me was just the kindest and most understanding person that you could imagine. And from a really male dominant figure of having the power to just say no to me, and the questions you'll have to read in my article that I answered. I mean, for me to then finally get one right before my written piece, just one sentence, it was just amazing. I look back now in thinking, there are people who are out there who are vouching for you to actually get what you want, but you have to do the try. And some of you may think to yourself, well, you didn't really try, you didn't study and so forth. That's just me. It's just my personality that I've always had in my life, where, if I study, I study. If I don't, I don't. And I can't take that away from who I am. It's because sometimes studying would make me over anxious. And I remember organic chemistry. I can't, my professor had to give me the grade that he knew I deserved, because when I would take the test, I would overthink it, and it was just, I questioned everything. So for me, it was just more of like, you got to know who I am. And so going into the finality of it is that when you got to go in and then take the Pledge of Allegiance in front of everyone, that to me was the ultimate. Because all my life as a student in the United States of America, when you stand up and you say the Pledge of Allegiance, it was just something you did. It was something that everyone stood up and did without question. But really, when I look at my students, I realize that many, if not all, if some, have really truly haven't grasped the understanding of the words. And I have recited that in my article of when we stand up and recite it. When I looked around and I said the Pledge of Allegiance of the United States of America and to the Republic for which we stand. I mean, all of that stuff. I look around and I'm thinking to myself, this is an amazing feeling, this power within to go, we are united. And let me tell you, people were wearing their wardrobe, there just so many accoutrements of just so many different amazing celebratory type of outfits you could imagine from their own nationality. And here I am thinking, I don't even remember what I was wearing. I'm sure it was, of course, proper, but at the same time, I'm thinking to myself, this is just an amazing, beautiful piece of memory that I'm going to have to remember. And I just remember once we were all done, this like sigh of relief around everyone, like people took this breath that I can still hear today. And when you look around and see these big, just genuine smiles of just feeling like they just crossed this bridge that all of a sudden they were permitted to pass. That is the piece that to me, it was like, this is why you pledge. This is this promise that you say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to do something that will count. I will hold myself accountable for whatever I do that may not be helpful to the community or the society. I'm going to matter. I'm going to make a mark and you're going to see it because this moment I just made that promise. And that's what I do is when I look at my students, you don't tell them, it's for them to know. That's just like my own children. It's their journey. It's their life. They have to make that decision on their own because no matter how many times you could preach it, as a teacher, I get this. Even as a parent, definitely get this. You can preach all you want, but until they're ready to really perceive it and understand it in their own way, just like how I was perceiving it at that very moment when I looked around, I understood the true meaning. I really did. And so when I applied for my first patent, it can be very challenging because I wanted to do it my way. I wanted to apply it for myself and, and thinking I can take the steps by steps. And thank you for YouTube videos and, Google University where I'm sitting there doing all the research myself of how to take it step by step to apply. I knew that some pieces were not at a professional level where an attorney could look at and go, oh yeah, that's exactly how I would have done it. But I knew that there was a progress. And I knew that there was a process, and I knew that I was producing something that would get me forward. And I would have, and it may prolong the situation because I didn't know 100% of what I was doing. Whenever you're doing something for the first time, baking a cake, making something, sewing something, creating songs, whatever it is, that you see yourself just an amateur at that point, but your mind is saying to yourself, this is going to get done. And no matter how long it's going to take, you've already made up your mind that you're going to pursue it. And therefore there is going to be an end all to all the hard work and all the sacrifice that you're making. And then when you look back, no matter how long it's taken you, you're going to look back and go, it's done now. And I know all the steps that I've taken. And sometimes when you're that person to take all the long routes, then I know it's just going to be a shorter route the next time, whether it's going to be for me to learn again or for me to teach someone else. This is why we help one another. And so I do that to myself. And I remember, and I didn't mention this in my article, but when I was getting certified in teaching, I remember my lab professor or coordinator telling me that, that it's not going to be sometimes the hard things that is going to be difficult or challenging for you to teach. It's going to be the easy steps, because sometimes you're going to skip some of the easy steps thinking everybody will already know how to do that. And I get that so well as a teacher and as a parent, pardon me, is that, sometimes you have to repeat yourself over and over because you're not being heard the first time, especially being a middle school student and teacher, because that it's just going from one ear to another. And you always have to say that. It's like, you could see it in their eyes, and you have to be forgiving. And as a parent, it's harder for you to forgive because you want your children to get down the first time, that hard notch in you that's so caring in making sure that they do not take the long route, you know, because you can only be so much to a student, but when it's your own children, you just take it so personal. It's very difficult to be that permissive about time, and you know, the impact that you give your children is like an everyday 24/7 kind of a thing. And so that's a different story, right? But when I was going through my patent, I'm grateful that I have these people that want to give me advice. I'm asking questions. I've written down questions to ask prior to. And even as I've asked them, I have to ask again sometimes just to make sure I'm clear. And then when you hang up, sometimes you're still not clear. But you know what? I don't feel that people are saying, well, you just quit. You don't know what you're doing. Because you run into those. You know, I remember going through a calculus class and I did have a professor. I was the only female in there. You know, I was saying, what are you doing here? And so sometimes it's like you have to make an ultimate choice. Is he right? Is he not? I mean, what am I doing here? You know, that is that part where at the end of the day, though, you then say to yourself, am I making the choice because I said to myself that this is the choice that I'm standing by? You know, in other words, am I making the choice for me? Or am I working toward oneness that I think I'm a part of when really is this creating a division? Because sometimes when we make a stand, I get that piece. But when we make a promise together as one, like, look, we have our differences. We know that we're not all the same. And yet for my sake, for my peace, for my unified mentality of wanting to be one, what can I do in taking an accountability of where my light is shining or where your darkness is moving toward? And that is when you have to ask yourself, what am I moving toward? What is it that I want out of this? If I am standing up, I'm standing up for what? If I'm remaining seated, I'm remaining seated for what? And regardless of what decision you make, are you okay with it? You know? And so finding reasons to recite a promise through a pledge to me was very important for me to write. Besides, I mean, you know, in all addition to all the other articles that I always pray and feel that is important to address, because I want people to really think about these things in asking ourselves, it's like, what are we becoming for our next generation? And it's not to look at it in a negative way at all whatsoever. It's like, you know, as my husband always says, clearly the analytical one in this family and very more forthright in his very analytic in his decision making, and yet forthright in his words. Sometimes that can be very cutting, especially when you've been a partner, you know, for over 30 years, and me always objecting and being a rebel at the decisions I make. Just because you tell me turn left doesn't mean I'm going to turn left. That, you know, we're always questioning each other, which is a good thing for growth. But at the same time, some things do we have to question? You know, it's like if we're rowing in the same direction, and if we know that we are forgoing that very same mindset, and that, you know, and we have the right type of goal that we know is positive for all, can't we just all then make the promise to say, look, I'm going to do my part, you can do your part, and we're not always going to be perfect at it. We're not going to be right at everything we do. We're going to be bumping heads. Yes, we're going to have some differences, and yet are we still foregoing the very goal that we said we were going to reach at the very end? And yes, I have failed a test. I already shared that with you, right? In my driver's test and in me taking my naturalization, you know, yes, all right. And my patent, you know, I'm going to go, I worked on another one and so forth, but it's still going to be ongoing, because that's what you ask for yourself, is that growth and that finding that reason within yourself to promise that, you know what, I'm going to make a mark. I'm going to do my part. So in the words of my mother, God bless us all. I really hope that you continue to embrace everything that you are in pursuit to happen or make happen, and go about it. Make those mistakes, not intentionally, but if when you do, know that you're going to get to that finish, and no matter what, work for that betterment, for saying, I'm going to make that mark, because I know you're going to make your mark, and I know you're going to make your mark, and together we're just going to be stronger and better together. Have a great day, everyone. Again, in the words of my mother, God bless us all. Continue to embrace you and love you. We will see you next time.